بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والتأدب والتأديب والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله والسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء مرضات الله ووجهه وقربه سبحانه. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق الحلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I'm honored to be back with you today, especially in the company of these great scholars like Sidi Abdul Hakim Murad, Sidi Fawdi, and others. Yesterday, in speaking about theology, I emphasized the fact that you have to begin at the beginning. And this is one of the most important things in our theological project. And in fact, in every aspect of the intellectual civilization of Islam, you've got to get the beginnings right. You have to begin with first principles. You have to get your definitions tight. And from there, then we begin. One of the most important purposes of theology, therefore, especially at the fundamental level, is that it lays down the foundations that all of us as Muslims must agree to. And in doing that, it establishes the basic elements of our perception of reality as it actually is. And this project is, of course, focused on what is qat'i, what is unambiguous in revelation and in intellect, and then also in what we know from customary experience. So with this, we lay the foundation. And it's very important that we understand that this foundation is not the building. It is what underlies the civilization. Imam al-Ghazali is always telling us in his Ihya Ulum al-Din about ilm al-mu'amala, this foundational knowledge that enables us to carry out the transaction between ourselves, and between ourselves and others, and between ourselves and God, and between ourselves and the creation of God that He's made around us. And always He's telling us that this knowledge will bring you to the door of ilm al-mukashafa, which is the knowledge of the unveiling of the profound realities that underlie all creation and that give us the true meaning and the fullest meaning of life and what is real. And this is also one of the great purposes of theology. It is to lay down for us the foundations by which we expand and by which we grow, and by which we are able to give reality a voice in our civilization and to arrive at this knowledge of ultimate realities. And those ultimate realities we can call metaphysics. Metaphysics is the science of haqa'iq, the science of the ultimate realities that underlie creation. And this is something that is beyond the scope of most human beings. It's something that they cannot fathom on their own. In fact, even if we speak about it discursively, it would be something that most people do not understand. But theology lays the foundation for that also. And metaphysics is as important in the project of civilization as these foundational elements are. Each one has to be in its own place. And just as kalam, discursive theology, has the purpose of defending the religion at a very fundamental level and establishing what must be believed and rejecting what must not be believed, so also metaphysics, as it grows into this great palace of light, it also is essentially there to defend the religion. And it is also necessary. And we ultimately have to go through that door of mukashafa. We don't all go through that, but in the society, we could even say it's a fard kifaya, that we have great men and women who are illuminated by that ilm al-mukashafa, and then can give us the answers to all things. If we look at the great masters of Islamic civilization, many of whom we know, like a Shaykh al-Akbar, Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, God be pleased with him, and many of whom are regional. Here in Nusantara, you have many great people like that, for example. These people stand on the solid foundations of what is qat'i in this religion. Ibn Arabi, in his book, Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, in the first part of that book, gives us his aqeedah. And that aqeedah is the standard aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And one of the reasons that he does that is to emphasize that even though you may not realize that, I am standing on this foundation. And if you understand anything that I say to be in contradiction to that, then I don't agree. That everything I do is in answer to that. And out of this comes that huge structure, which is not philosophy, not in his case, it is illumination, it is mukashafa. But in that you have an answer to everything. And this is also absolutely essential in any religion and in any religious civilization. The metaphysics has also got to be there. If we look in the Kalam tradition, which is again foundational and absolutely essential, and of course our Kalam tradition also grows through history, and it engages in a discourse with the metaphysics and with the philosophy and other things. It goes through different stages. But the Kalam often will give us very basic answers to things. So, for example, if we talk about good and evil, or we talk about heaven and hell, we may find that the discourse in Kalam is not as rich as we would like it to be. Again, because it's very fundamental, and it's based on what is known to be necessary, possible, and impossible. It is not the whole answer. Whereas if we go into the palace of the metaphysics, there we have profound answers to all of these things. For example, that the nature of evil is privation, and that evil is essentially a psychotic phenomenon. that exists in the nafs, the psyche, and it's real in the world at large, but it's not rooted in the way that truth is rooted. And even if we talk about heaven and hell, then we talk about identity and other things like that. So this is something that I would like to talk about today. That in the reviving of the meaning of values and self and humanity, we have to have the whole structure. And this has got to be the vision that we seek to bring about. The teaching of sound theology. And again, in conjunction with or juxtaposition to those paradigms and cognitive frames that are common in the thought of our age, among postmodernists, among modernists, and among others. But then we have to rebuild the palace of the lights. And here, this is something very important in Islamic civilization. Because what is the language of the metaphysics? How do we communicate that to our society? How do we build that palace of lights? This is what you had at earlier times in the great civilizations of Islam in Spain and Portugal and North Africa, West Africa, in Nusantara, in Central Asia and elsewhere. Primarily that's built by art and architecture. And the reason for this is that most of those discursive truths that the metaphysics talks about and that it elaborates, that we have in people like Sadruddin al-Qunawi, who's one of the great metaphysicians. These are things that very few people can understand. And they take perhaps even a lifetime of devotion to be able to master correctly. But there are those people that can do that, just as in the modern world, not everyone can master quantum physics or other precise sciences and technology and so forth. You've got to have people who do that. But in our tradition, we had people like that. They master these things amazingly. But then the person who draws that picture, that makes it clear to the society at large, this is the artist, this is the poet, this is the architect. And as Sidi Abdul Hakim noted, beauty is the splendor of truth. This is a Platonic aphorism, a Platonic truth, but it is real. Beauty is the splendor of truth. When you have the truth, and when you articulate the truth in the most comprehensive way that can be, with the foundational knowledge and then also with the knowledge that comes from mukashafa and spiritual enlightenment, which is the fruit of the tree, then that truth transforms you. It overtakes you. And this is part of what we can understand from the previous speech about the necessity of overcoming the ego and disciplining the self. Okay, so that truth then becomes your internal quality. And that truth, when it takes you over and transforms you, it makes you internally beautiful. Truth is beauty. God is beautiful. And He loves beauty. And traditionally we understood that to mean also by mafhum al-mukhalafa, by the understanding that you get, which is unspoken but contrary, that God does not love what is ugly. And Islamic civilizations were extremely beautiful. They take on different forms wherever they appear. Even in the same region, you'll see that every ethnic group that comes into Islam will have its own unique formulas for beauty. And they all come together wonderfully, but each of them is unique. Beauty takes on infinite varieties, but not everything is beautiful. So you get the truth. And again, the truth here is not just the foundational truth, which is always there. It's got to be the basis. But it's also that elaboration of reality that gives reality a voice in the world. And that transforms you inwardly. And it makes you beautiful. And what do we call that beauty? We call it virtue. Virtue, good character. We call it balance, adl and adala. Getting everything in the right place, giving everything its due. It's grace. And when we have that truth, then we manifest it in everything that we do. And so beauty becomes the way we live. Beauty becomes the way we speak to each other, the courtesies we have, the houses we build, the gardens that we have, and so forth. Beauty is therefore the hallmark of truth. Just as ugliness is the mark of evil, ugliness is the mark of the loss of truth. So this is very important to understand, again, how to make our societies beautiful, how to revive the arts and architecture and so forth, and other expressions of beauty so they do that. Because beauty speaks to the people. Beauty is attractive. Beauty tells us what we cannot express discursively. So it is an essential medium of taking people to those truths. And this is why traditional Islamic societies place such a high value on beauty. So we live today in a highly anti-metaphysical age. And the development of Western civilization over the last 500 years has been a process of the destruction of the metaphysics that it once had. And today our science, our ethics, our values, everything are without metaphysics. They are anti-metaphysical. We Muslims also are the most anti-metaphysical that we've ever been in history. In the past, we understood these things, and we cherished them, and we cultivated them. Today, on the contrary, because perhaps of the way that we have been drawn into modern civilization, and we've taken on mindsets that are actually foreign to ourselves, then we no longer have this understanding. We no longer have this conviction. In fact, we can be said to be as anti-metaphysical as anyone. But this is something that has to be revived. This is something that has to be revived. The religion has got to be able to answer all of your questions. And also, it's got to do that in a way that's beautiful and in a way that creates for you an environment that is welcoming and harmonious, in which you are at home. And when we can't do that, when there is no metaphysics in religion, there are no answers to the big questions, then the response of that is a type of sclerosis that ultimately will destroy the religion itself. So that in the destruction of the metaphysics and the great understanding of the religion that comes with that, you have a number of typical responses. One of those is the complete rejection of religion. And of course we see that a lot today. And you see it usually among the most intelligent and the most gifted. Historically, we were able to keep the most intelligent among us and the most gifted, not just in the religion, but at the very core of the religion. And they become the most enthusiastic builders of Islamic thought and of Islamic civilization. And why is that so? Because they know that we have an answer to everything, and that this religion is true, that it's not just assertions. It is not just commands and prohibitions. It is not just externalities, but it is the fullest expression of truth. And you can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And you can go higher and higher and higher. And we express that in our poetry. We express that in our music. We express that in our architecture. We express that in our art and everything that we do. And all of this is like a symphony that instructs the entirety of the society and raises all the people together, both those who can understand these things and those who cannot. Whenever that goes, then you are going to lose the best among us. Isn't this a crisis that we face today? We see it over and over again. Many of our scholars today cannot answer the questions. They cannot respond to the challenges of secularism. They cannot address the most important issues of the time. And this failure has got to be addressed, and it's got to be taken care of. We've got to do that. If you don't have metaphysics, if you don't have this foundation and then the beautiful palace that comes on top of it, you will lose the very best among you. And we can't afford to do that. And another response that you will get out of that is the response of extremism. And these are the people who don't have answers, and they don't have understanding, but they do have a commitment to the fact that they believe that this religion is true. And their fanaticism, actually their extremism, is an expression of their psychological vulnerability, because they don't have answers. But they will hold to it anyway. They will take the action that they feel is necessary. And in this process, they destroy what remains of the edifice. So you have these two extremes. One of them is just check out. Leave the religion altogether. Either have no religion. Maybe you could find a better one on the market. Maybe you could find a philosophy of chakras or something like that that will make life meaningful to you. And the other one is the extremist response, which is perhaps even more dangerous. And perhaps in between that you have people, who are neither way, maybe out of politeness to their tradition, politeness to their elders and parents. They will continue to hold to the religion in some formal way. But even they don't have the commitment that is needed. And if we look at our Muslim communities today, we find that complacency is a very typical characteristic of many Muslims. It's a type of complacency that, it's like, it's not commitment on the one hand, it's not understanding on the other, but then they don't check out either. But they're sort of in this lukewarm state. And these are diseases of the soul. And we have got to deal with that. And again, we've got to have a vision. We've got to respond to the challenges that are there before us. And we've got to address the intellectual universe that we live in. But you have to address it by going to first principles. You've got to go back to the beginning. And if you look into the thought of different thinkers, they all become rigorous at a certain point. Otherwise, they wouldn't be read. But you cannot really benefit from their thought if you don't take it back to the beginning and see where they got things right and where they got things wrong. So we have to have a vision. We've got to put together that vision. And in doing that, we have this rich tradition of theology, of law, of jurisprudence, of maxims, maqasid. We've got this traditional wealth of theological discourse at different planes of the intellect. And then, of course, we've got that palace of lights that was built by the greatest of us of all, the Arifin, the Arifat, these people who come to know God and are given the fruits of that. And they express it usually in beauty, like Jalaluddin Rumi and others, Hafiz, the great poets of the Arab world and of the non-Arab world. I know of a man who once went to visit a particular place in Pakistan, and he stayed there at this particular place, until late at night, and then he had to go back to his hotel, and a Pakistani, cart driver came to pick him up with his horse and his open cart. They call that something special in Urdu, which I don't remember. And this man spoke Persian, but he didn't speak Urdu. The other man spoke Urdu, he didn't speak Persian. But he told him, I want you to take me to the hotel's such and such. And so he said, get in. And amazingly, this driver of the cart, who was a poor man, he said if you looked at his clothing, you could go and buy it in the market for a couple of dollars. He's a very poor man. But all the way back to his hotel, over a period of maybe 45 minutes or an hour, this driver began to recite to him from Hafiz and Rumi. So he'd memorized this in Persian. He said, I learned more metaphysics in that single night, in that single ride, than I learned in 30 years of study. Okay, and what's the point? Again, the point is that beauty is what speaks this most eloquently. And beauty is the splendor of truth. It is the language of truth. And that is what made our civilization love beauty and cultivate beauty in everything we did. In the clothes we wore, in the dishes we ate on, or the leaves of the plants that we ate on, in the way we prepared our food, in the houses we built, in the wood carvings that we made, and in everything we did. And that is a fundamental part of Islam. Beauty is absolutely essential to Islam. And then it speaks this language that no one else can speak. And it cultivates a society that can grow into that beauty and that can synthesize that beauty within itself. Islamic societies were extremely skilled. And it's very important for us to study the way our societies were. The Muslim city was a garden city. It produced all the food that it needed to eat, even though it imported. But legally, it had to be self-sufficient. And the labor in that city was skilled labor, usually labor that's based in guilds. And those guilds were often spiritual orders, in which metaphysics was very important. In the wood carvings that you have in Nusantara, all of these begin in a particular center, which is a sign of the Creator and creation, and they work out in a particular way, and they radiate up towards the truth and heaven. All of that was very conscious. And again, it's a way of manifesting this reality that we believe in every form of the world around us, to give reality a voice. So these are things that we need to aspire for. And I'd like to come back to where we ended yesterday, and that's the fact that human beings are, by their nature, incurably religious. Their responses to things are going to be invariably religious. We are homo religiosus. We are the religious animal, man. And when we get good religion, we are good. We become human. As Imam al-Ghazali said, If it were not for the scholars who embody true religion, human beings would become animals. They would become less than human. We have to give that back to them. Al-ulama surujul azmina. The scholars are the radiant lights of the times, men and women scholars. Each of them is the lamp that radiates in their age. So we have to begin to put together that vision again. We have to begin to live that again. And in this, we are meeting the greatest need of humanity today. Because humanity today, having been put all together in the same boat, are undergoing religious crises that are the greatest they have ever undergone. As we mentioned yesterday, you have a new religious movement born every 12 hours. A new religious movement, two, born every day. Usually they are identity religion. They have very small groups, and they are based on the idea that I am right and everyone else is wrong. They have in them this element of narcissism and ego and rejection of the other. But nevertheless, even they, in their very great limitations, reflect this profound need that we have to be religious. The 20th century is the most secular of all ages that we know in history. The Soviet Union, Maoist China, the fascist phenomenons of Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy, and so forth. But even these were secular alternatives to religion. And even these reflect the fact that human beings in that 20th century, which is not that radically different from our own, they too are seeking for a solution. They're seeking for a meaning. And you are the ones, we are the ones who can do that in such a way that bring all human beings together. Of course, we bring together those who agree with us, who accept the fundamentals. That will be the ummah. Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas. You are the best community brought forth for humankind. The best of all people to all people. That's how the Salaf understood that. You must be the best of all people to all people. And then we have those who don't agree with us. They don't accept the fundamentals. And historically, we have the gift of living with them, not just with toleration, even with protection, even encouraging them to be better at what they do. So this is the priceless gift. This is the essential need of humanity today to be able to continue to exist and to go forward. You can bring clarity out of this confusion. You can give humanity its humanity back. But to do that, you've got to be transformed by the truth itself. Yourself. You've got to imbibe it. You've got to become beautiful. Then you can produce that beauty, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. And we can offer to humanity this gift which they need very much. And this requires, again, bringing back also the metaphysics. Without that, there's no value. Without that, there's no evaluation. Without that, there's no understanding of reality, and there's no understanding of ourselves either. May you be successful in these days. I apologize for the fact that I come and run. I should be here listening to all your discourse. That no doubt creates a certain incoherence. I personally don't like going about things that way. Unfortunately, I have other commitments that I have to keep. So I ask you to excuse me. But I hope that in these days, being with these great scholars, men and women who are presenting to you, that we will find the clarity that we need. And inshallah, we'll be able to go forward. And we'll be able to bring back civilization to this part of the world and to other parts of the world, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, and to show the world Islam with its beautiful face, its real face. That which is ugly cannot be true. That which is ugly carries the mark of the Antichrist. It carries the mark of falsehood. We know these things intuitively. We know them also metaphysically. We've got to get back our beauty, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And this has got to be the means by which we speak to humanity. Beauty. This is our weapon. A weapon that you know very well in your past. When Islam was spread in Java, it wasn't spread by swords or spears, was it? It was spread by puppets, Kali Jaga. And the puppets told the story of the metaphysics, and it articulated that against the background of a Hindu-Buddhist tradition that was extremely rich and extremely metaphysical. And then it was able to articulate a new metaphysics that didn't contradict that one, but that was able to flush it out and to fill it out and to make it meaningful. So this is the kind of thing that we need to do, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. May we be successful at that. Wassalamu alaikum.